Hi there, and welcome to the Irish Writers Centre webinar, Putting Your Best Foot Forward with Brian Langan, an exclusive opportunity to hear from an expert on editing your own work, working to deadlines, polishing your scripts, and other bits and bobs related to the novel writing process. My name is Bernadette Greenham, the Irish Writers Centre Education Programmer and Novel Fair Coordinator. Along with chatting to Brian today, I'll also be here to answer your queries and anything that you need to know in relation to the 2019 fair. For those of you who don't know, the Irish Writers Centre is the National Resource Centre for Irish Literature. Being based in Dublin means that people can have difficulty accessing our resources, so we're hoping this webinar today is just one way in which we can reach out to people around the country and overseas. Our annual Novel Fair competition is an Irish Writers Centre initiative. It aims to introduce up-and-coming writers to top publishers and literary agents, giving first-time novelists the opportunity to bypass the slush pile, pitch their ideas and place their synopsis and sample chapters directly into the hands of publishers and agents. Every year, a number of writers, usually 12, are selected by our 3 judges from among hundreds of applicants, and they come to our fair. They meet the publishers and agents from around Ireland and the UK, and they get a chance to pitch themselves and their work with the aim of getting their work published. To date, we're on our 8th year of the Novel Fair, and so far we've had 12 books published, with 2 more to be published in the next 2 years. So when you're thinking of 14 books out of 8 years, it's quite a good rate, quite a good success rate for first-time novelists. For this webinar today, we're going to discuss a little bit on editing your work, focuses on the Novel Fair itself. And we will be chatting to Brian about specific editing questions that will help you get your work ready for submission, and also if you are selected as a finalist, how to get that work ready to meet the publishers and agents. So we're going to chat for about 20 minutes with Brian, and then I'll go through some of your queries. If you do want to submit a query to the webinar today, you'll need to sign into YouTube, and you can access the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll try and go through all the queries today. If we don't get to your query, or if you're not comfortable submitting a query, you can send it into info@novelfair.ie, and we will get back to everybody. You do have a query for Brian, if it's not related to Novel Fair, but it's in relation to editing, and we can also send it on to Brian, and he will get back to you as well. So without further ado, we'll get started. So I'll introduce Brian. He is a freelance editor with over 2 decades of experience in publishing. He's attended Novel Fair multiple times, so he's experienced in editing, but also in meeting the finalists and how the Novel Fair works as well. He's been an editor with Transworld Doubleday Ireland, an imprint of Penguin Random House. His authors include Donal Ryan, Hilary Fannin, Colm O'Regan, and Conor O'Cleary. He's also a published author himself and is currently working on his 2nd novel. Brian, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to meet potential Novel Fair finalists.
Excellent. You're very welcome. So we'll start with looking at editing. So maybe we can just talk about what exactly is so important about the editing process. Why is it so vital for people to edit their work before it reaches publishers and agents?
Well, I think, I mean, from my experience of submissions, there can be a temptation when you put the full stop on that first draft, just to think it's ready to go and to send it off. And I think inevitably it's a mistake to do so, simply because there's always something you miss. It could be something very big, it could be minor issues. There could be issues around character or plot, and or the structure, or the language, or the pacing, the flow. So it's worth reading and reworking, because I think there's a truism, I think, that the writing is actually really done in the rewriting and the redrafting. So I think it's very significant to try and look at your work with an objective eye, and to try and bring a reader's eye to your work when you're editing and rewriting.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I've heard that before, that writing is in the rewriting as well, and it is so important. So for writers at home who can't afford to pay for a professional editor, or they haven't gotten as far as, being in touch with a professional editor, how can you go about editing your own work? Is there any tips for that?
Well, there's numerous books out there on the craft of editing. So I mean, it's worth reading books. A book I'd recommend is self-editing for fiction writers by Rennie Brown and Dave King.
Okay.
But I mean, there's also books on writing craft itself. Stephen King's book.
Love that one. Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, there's a lot of books out there. So that could be a first port of call. Another is simply just to read writers that you really admire and try and get a sense of what they do, and to learn from the craft of those writers and listen to them talking about their writing and listen to interviews with writers. And I think also then a step further is a writers group, which is I think being part of a writers group can really apart from anything else, it can be a strong motivating factor in if they have a discipline to have a piece written for next week, have something new written for the next meeting, then I think that can really help to motivate you to do so. Writers groups, the best writers groups have a strong sense of trust amongst themselves and a strong sense of critiquing in a positive way. I think it's always important to be proactive and positive in critiquing another writer's work. There can be a danger of being a bit too soft as well when you're in a writers group. I think it's similar with if you have family and friends reading as well.
Yeah.
Unless there's somebody who you really trust to give you a very strong, honest opinion, then family and friends might not necessarily have a very objective view of your writing.
Yes, well, that's actually going to bring me on to my next question about who can you trust the most to give you objective, constructive feedback on your work. So you would say go with writers groups?
I think writers groups, I mean, certainly a very good writers group, very strong writers group.
And there'd be more honesty there, as well as sensitivity, but not wanting to pander into the writer as well. Yeah. I
mean, in the longer term, writers, professional writers can actually be very generous with their time as well. And if you do find you have contact with or an opportunity to speak to a professional writer, it's worth asking them, I mean, without being too persistent about it.
Yes.
To ask them would they read your work or would they? And quite often you find that they'd be generous enough with a certain amount of their time.
And you can return the favour as well. So it works both ways. Do you think people can harm their work by over editing? Is there such a thing as too much editing?
I think so. I think you can become a little bit obsessive about the editorial process, and you can feel that you need to keep fixing things until such a point where, in fact, you push it too far. There does come a point where I think you have to trust your instinct and feel that you've done enough and you've done the right thing. There's also danger in the editorial process that a particular change you make might have a ripple process through the rest of the book that you mightn't necessarily notice, and that involves then going back and fixing it as such. So I think you have to think of it. Think before you make a substantial change to a book how it's going to affect the rest of the manuscript. Okay.
And is there any kind of a set guideline, that one rule for all, and go with 4 times, go with 5 times, or is it just
there isn't really
never ending?
No, I mean some writers can do 20, 30 drafts of a novel. Some can be happy after 2 or 3 drafts, and it's just there and it's done. And inevitably there comes a point where you have to say, I've done enough. I've done all I can feel I can do. And it may well be that a professional editor in a publishing company or an agent may pick up the process if they do take it on. They will have the fresh eye on it.
Yeah, and I suppose everybody has a different process. I heard John Boyne say that he types out his first draft, and then he prints it out, and then he rewrites the entire thing from his actual printout, and then he rewrites by hand over and over again. So everybody has this completely.
Everybody does, and I mean, I've heard writers talking about that they rely on writing longhand, and that they write out a scene or a chapter longhand, and then effectively they're by the time they type it up, they've already redrafted what they've written longhand. So that can work for some people. For others, I think it's I mean, I think printing it out and reading it aloud. Sometimes recording yourself, having somebody else read it to you and can identify passages that just may not be quite working, or that don't ring authentically in the ear.
Okay, interesting. So the we kind of covered this already, but how can a writer know when their novel is ready, that they can stop and say, right, it's time to submit my 10,000 words. I've done enough. I can't do any more.
I think you got to trust your instinct, and you got to think that if you feel that in your gut this is as good as you can make it, then that's the time to say yes, it's done.
Okay. And you're an author yourself, so you obviously go through it from both sides.
Yes.
So do you have different processes then when you're working with somebody else's piece and working with your own, or do you try to work?
Yeah, I tend to do a lot of editing as I go. And I almost do a lot of editing in my own head as I'm writing, partly because I've learned through editing some strong writers that what I know works. So honestly, yeah, I mean, I suppose when I'm currently writing, I'm very much on the first draft with it. So I have yet to delve into the way of editing of that. But I know already that I do need to do a second draft, because I already know some things that I need to fix. But I want to get that first draft done first.
Okay. And would you find in your own work that it's a completely different novel than from the one that you started off with? Is there huge changes there, or does it always kind of hold on to the actual same kind of idea?
I think you have to let the characters teach you where you're going with the novel, because I know myself, I had an idea that my main character was I was going to have a small amount about her childhood.
Yeah.
But in fact, in the writing process, that has stretched out to a third of the book. So her childhood actually is effectively the first act of the book.
Okay.
So yeah, I think you have to let your characters lead you by the hand. And,
okay, interesting. Yeah.
To bring you to where the story wants to go.
Okay. Okay. So in terms of Novel Fair itself and the first 10,000 words that writers are submitting, so the judges are going to be looking at over 100 different scripts in a short space of time. So how can writers get those first 10,000 words to stand out and catch the attention of the judges?
I think firstly, is to have a focus on that 10,000 words, in terms of looking to see, does it achieve what you set out to achieve when you started writing it? Does it give to the reader what you want to give to the reader? And if it doesn't, maybe think about character, and think about the style of writing, and think about the storyline and how compelling it is, how much it is true to your vision of the book.
Yeah.
And I think particularly the early pages are worth working and reworking so they really grab the attention. It is quite significant. I mean, it's probably a bit of a cliche at this stage to talk about the kind of the killer opening and how significant that is. But when it comes to submitting to editors, sometimes they may not get a chance to read beyond the second page, because if they're not drawn in, then they know a reader isn't going to be drawn in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So make those early pages as strong and as give them as much impact as they can.
Yeah, and I suppose you want to think as well, if a writer goes in and they're picking this book up in a bookstore, and they're looking, there's hundreds of books in the bookstore, they want to read that first page and to catch their attention straight away. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I mean, obviously, you need to be able to sustain that as well. So
of course,
it's the opening is a strong opening will grab a reader, but you need them to be able to hold them to it. So you do that through well-rounded characters, compelling storylines. The character will generally lead the story where it should go. So.
Okay, and we might just talk a little bit about writing a synopsis then. So when people are entering for the Novel Fair, they have to submit their first 10,000 words and also a synopsis. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that. People tend to get synopsis and blurbs confused.
Yeah.
So maybe you could just talk a little bit about the differences between those and how a synopsis can catch the attention of the judges as well.
Well, I mean, I suppose talk about a blurb first. A blurb is really a marketing tool that a publisher uses to sell to the reader. So what a blurb usually does is it looks at what's unique about the book, what you could call the hook that's going to draw the reader in.
Yeah.
And it will, they will use that as the basis for, for the
publicity.
It could be the tagline in the book. Yeah. The synopsis, on the other hand, usually has more of an element of revealing a certain amount about the story and about the characters. But at the same time, what I think the best synopses capture something of the spirit of the book, capture something of the style of the book as well, because I think one of the mistakes is that you can actually lose the style of your writing if you try to too pedantically tell the story.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know how many I've read many synopses that felt quite dry and just a bit plodding, and then I've opened up the first pages and I read and I thought, wow, this is much stronger than I thought it would be, because the synopsis is giving me the wrong impression of it.
Yes,
so I think the synopsis should capture that spirit. It should also, I think, give a good strong sense of the character and what makes that character compelling and why they're why you feel passionate about them. So communicate your passion for that character in the synopsis.
Okay. And should a synopsis have the entire story there? Should it tell what happens at the end as well?
That's a good question. I think but in terms of the entire story, I think no. I think you need to really think about what the core of the story is, and try just recount and tell that basic. I think you want to get across a sense of the character's conflict in it, and where the steps they may take to resolve that conflict. Now, when we actually get to the end and reveal what the resolution is, I think some editors do like that. Some editors don't. If it's a book that has a strong twist at the end, for instance, some editors don't like to be told the twist.
Okay.
Others do. So I think you have to
use your own judgment.
Yeah.
Okay. And just as an editor yourself, have you ever been turned off a book based on the synopsis? Have you not given a book a chance, or would you always have? Well,
I'd always read the. I would always read the first few pages anyway, because I think simply because I know that some writers might not have put enough work in as they could have into the synopsis. But that said, I think it's a sign a well-written synopsis is a sign of a writer who pays attention to the detail and pays attention to their craft.
Yeah, and I suppose have done their research as well and done as much preparation as possible. Okay, and for people, I suppose a lot of writers have been trying for years to get published and get the attention of publishers and agents. Do you have any tips for writers out there who have tried repeatedly and haven't gotten success yet?
It's a difficult question, simply because it can be the biggest frustration, and it can writers may not be aware just of quite how many submissions come across an editor's desk in the course of a year. An editor might see 500 manuscripts in a year, and it's impossible to pay the degree of attention to that you might be willing to as an editor. So you may have finally crafted this manuscript, and it can be quite a blow to realize that an editor has only read a couple of pages of it and rejected on that basis.
Soul destroying sometimes. Yeah.
I think though you need to kind of think of the positives, and if you've got positive responses, even in rejection, where a positive is given, to take that positive and use it, because that's a sign that you're doing something right. And if you get a more than a standard rejection, then it means that the editor has got some engagement with it, and they may even be open to giving advice. And I think also it's very important to politely thank an editor, particularly when you get that, because
when they take the time to put that work in.
They may be very open to seeing further work.
Yeah. And there's a lovely story in On Writing by Stephen King where he says he was getting rejected for years, and the first time he got a letter back from an editor, just that, actually with feedback on his work, he was so excited. He pinned it to his wall. And then every time he got a letter back, he kept pinning them to his wall until his wall was covered. Yeah. And even though they were all rejections, it was all quite positive because it was all helping him with his work, and he was taking all that feedback on board. And again, if you look at somebody like Donal Ryan as well, I think he was rejected like 45 times.
47 times.
47.
At least, yes.
Yeah. So, you do have to look at that as well. I mean, everybody, I suppose, all writers go through rejection. Nobody ever just writes their first piece and gets published straight away.
I think, to succeed as a writer, you have to be resilient and you have to be persistent. And, that resilience, you have to have a thick skin to a certain extent, and to be able to take rejection on board and use it as a learning process. And, where feedback is given, listen to it. Now, that doesn't always mean that you have to do exactly what an editor suggests you do. Because, again, it comes down to trusting your instinct in something. But if you hear it enough times, the same point enough times from different editors, then there's probably is something quite significant.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the same thing comes with novel fair as well. So there's a lot of people who have entered multiple times and not gotten anywhere. But then, they keep reapplying. Just last year we had somebody, I think they had applied 3 or 4 times, and they had gone off and worked on their piece and come back and re-entered it. And then last year actually got through to as a finalist and ended up picking up an agent. Right. So at the moment, that's quite a good success story, and again, a sign of not giving up and, sticking with what you believe in and sticking with your work as well. So I suppose the message is don't give up.
Don't give up. Yes.
So we'll just go through a few novel fair queries, a few topics on novel fair itself. So you've been attended the novel fair. Was it 3 or 4 years that you've been here?
I've been here every year since except last year.
Okay.
Last year, so I think 7 years.
Okay, so you're quite experienced with meeting people from the other side of the table. So do you have any advice for people who come in on the day? What are publishers and agents looking for?
Well, the first thing I'd say is don't be intimidated by it, because it can be quite intimidating to face a room where you're going to be meeting a dozen or 15 agency publishers. And so the first thing I'd say is just, editors and agents are very nice people.
Yes.
They're often very curious people who and they're there because they are curious about you as a writer and about your writing, and they're there because they hope to find something special. So just have confidence that maybe that something special is in your work.
Yeah.
So that'll be the first point, and I suppose also I suppose be open and listen to what the agents and publishers are saying as well. And I think just go in and be yourself is a key point of that, because as well as looking for really good quality work, their agents and publishers are looking to see who's behind the work.
Yes.
Because ultimately, if they do take on a writer, they want that writer to be the main advocate for their work. They want that writer to go and do radio interviews. So you have to be able to sell your own work, and you have to be able to sell yourself as a writer. So be yourself, be natural, and be passionate about your writing as well.
Yeah.
And I'd also just caution that you don't go too far, because you can be either too arrogant, or you can go the other direction and sound too humble and too self-deprecating about your work. So just show confidence in your work, show confidence that you really believe in this story and these characters, and then you've already climbed several rungs of the ladder.
Yeah, exactly. And on the day itself as well, for finalists who are selected, not everybody you meet is going to be interested in your work.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then you can also get tips and advice and information, contacts, which a lot of writers want to do. And Kevin Kern is one of our former finalists who went on to get published.
Yeah.
But he actually has published, he's the only finalist I think that we've had who's gone on to publish a second book. But the second book was published through his contacts that he had made at the fair. So that was through meeting all the different publishers and agents that were there. So you can use that as well. So even if as I say, if the person that you're meeting that 15 minutes might not necessarily be, your book might not be for them, but then you can still get, you know, lots of other information and contacts from them. Is there anything that finalists shouldn't do on the day? Any, you know?
Well, as I say, just, you know, just watch, think about your think of it as a conversation, really, and so try not to force your, you know, too much overthinking of the you know, what your novel is about. Try not to get too deeply into the story, to talk about the story itself. It's perfectly fine, I think, to you know, to kind of hone your pitch first down to a couple of minutes, so that you know, then you can be led by questions about further.
Yeah.
But if you try to tell the entire story of the novel, and you're taking up 15 minutes in telling the story, you're going to lose the editor or the agent somewhere along the way, because it's very difficult to recount that, no matter how strongly you feel about the story.
Yes.
So keep it concise, keep it short, and don't ramble.
Exactly. Okay, and so for the first time ever this year, the finalists get a longer period between when they're contacted to be told that they're finalists and when the novel fair happens itself. So this time they've got 8 to 9 weeks to work on their scripts, whereas in previous years it was usually around 3 to 4 weeks. So any tips for how they can maximise their time? I mean, people have families, they've got jobs. 8 to 9 weeks is a really long time to go about, you know, re-editing your work.
It's not.
No.
I mean, chances are, you know, it could be a strong temptation to go back and just try a complete edit of that 10,000 words again, and there just may not be the time for that, and you may find yourself at the last minute, you know, not being fully prepared. So it's definitely worth, you know, those early pages, giving some attention to them, and just thinking, as I say, about character and story, and whether you've actually whether that 10,000 words gives enough of a character and enough of the story, and enough of a compelling reason for the editor or the publisher to want to read more.
Yes.
That's always the strong draw, that, you know, you want to read more. And I suppose just think really about what is the core of the story, and what is its hook, and try and bring those into your pitch. So, you know, practice your pitch, bring them into the synopsis, you know, as much as possible as well, to give a sense of that. And, you know, do spend some time on the synopsis. Don't entirely focus on editing the work itself.
Yeah.
So the synopsis and the pitch need a bit of attention as well.
Okay. Great. So we might go to, I just see a couple of questions are coming up here in the chat. So thanks to everybody for checking in. Hello, everyone. So just because we're talking about synopsis there, I seen a question from Deirdre. Hi, Deirdre, asking about her synopsis, and she's finding it difficult to get her synopsis into 300 words. Is the word count strict? It is strict because the judges have to read hundreds of these synopses, so we do keep that strict. But maybe Brian has some tips on how to condense that into 300 words.
I think, again, think about what the significant elements of the story are, and the main points of what moves the story forward, and just focus on those, and just take out, you know, you can include a brief mention of subplots if there's a subplot in there, but keep the focus on the main story and on the character. I think synopsis should be to give a sense of the story, but what you really want to give a sense of is the character themselves. Yes. So if you can do that without necessarily going into great detail on the story itself, then I think it will have a greater impact than trying to tell the full story. And I think 300 words is probably. Is that the recommended amount for publishers? That's about a page.
Yeah.
And I think when you go over more than a page, 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages, you're going to lose the interest, and you're going to lose you're going to. There is a discipline in it, and it actually helps writing a synopsis and keeping it down to that, to actually, you know, help you think about what is really significant in the novel, and that can also then help in editing the novel itself, because that's where your focus can be.
Okay, and I think I could be wrong now. I think it was Patricia Deevy as well who said that you should be able to describe your book in just one sentence.
Yeah.
So if you think of it that way when you're writing your synopsis, that you if you're talking to somebody, you're not going to be saying more than 300 words to somebody. So if you think of it as how you're speaking to somebody and describing your book, how condensed can you get that to still make it interesting? Yeah. I mean that's the classic, the elevator pitch that they talk about, and what you get across in that is character and what's unique about it, and hopefully a little bit of the style of the book as well, just in that couple of sentences. Yeah, exactly. So I'll just see if there's any other questions here. So we've got Joan. Hi, Joan. We're looking for 10,000 words, and we've mentioned the starting chapters of the novel. Okay, so we do get this question quite a bit. You don't have to send the first 10,000 words of your novel. That's completely up to you. Some people prefer to send 10,000 words from the middle or end of their novel, but we highly recommend sending it from the beginning, because the judges are reading this, again, they're reading hundreds of scripts. If they're reading something from the middle, you don't have the option of sending in an extra page to kind of set up the piece that you're sending in. So they're just reading this from scratch. They need to know exactly what's happening, where it's going. They need to be able to understand it, that it's not confusing. So I can see why you might want to send in, as an extract from somewhere else in the novel, but we strongly recommend, and the judges really prefer if it's the first 10,000 words. So I hope that's okay. So I'm going to mix the questions that are coming in on the live chat with some questions that were sent in advance. So one question that was sent in, I think we've kind of addressed already, but if you aren't successful this year, can you resend in your work? Of course you can. There's been many people who have submitted multiple times. They haven't been successful the first or the second time, and then they have been selected as a finalist on another occasion, and they've gone on to get agents as well. And I could be wrong, but I think somebody has actually gone on to get published as well on their second time entering the fair as well. So please don't lose faith if you're not successful this year. Somebody else has asked, should a novel be finished before submitting it? So we you don't have to have it finished before the deadline, but you should have a good idea of where it's going and know that it will be finished by December. So we'll be contacting people the first week in December, so you should be confident that your novel will be finished by then. If you can't confirm that you don't have a finished novel by December, you won't be eligible and your place will go to somebody else. So again, you don't have to have finished by the deadline in September, the submission deadline of the 10,000 words, but you should know where it's going and you should be confident that you will have it completed by December. So let's see. We have a question there about non-fiction and memoir. So it is a novel writing competition, exclusively fiction. So we don't accept non-fiction, we don't accept memoir or biographies, we don't accept short story collections. You should be a first-time novelist. So I'm sorry that non-fiction would be ineligible. As another question here about the synopsis, so maybe Brian, you could answer this. Yeah. Do you have to cover the entire plot in the synopsis? No,
no. I think it's just about isolating the key points and the points of the plot that actually will appeal to readers as well. So no, definitely don't need to cover the entire plot.
Yeah. Okay, and that was from Fiona. So thanks for sending that in, Fiona. We have a question here from Paul. In our belief, is there a life after the manuscript in other mediums? So film, TV, theatre, etc. Okay, so do you mean, should you include that in your application, that you see something for your manuscript after it's been published? Do you have any thoughts on that? Should people be thinking about that ahead of time?
It's certainly no harm to think about that. And certainly, for instance, if it's something that you feel strongly has potential as a film, then it's worth mentioning that. But I think editors and agents will often, will make that judgment themselves, and they I've talked to writers before where my own feeling was that something had quite a strong cinematic feel about it, and
Yes.
they will often be quite happy. That's something I think certainly was worth bringing up in terms of on the day of the fair itself, that if you have some idea of its possibilities in the films, it's worth mentioning that. Yes.
Okay, and when people submit to publishers and agents, do you think that they should include that in their synopsis as well, or
I don't know if it needs to be in a synopsis. I think
maybe in a cover letter?
Maybe in a cover letter, if
they strongly believe it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. So another question that came in advance of the webinar is how to define the genre if they're having difficulty putting their work, to define their work as a specific genre. So we kind of deal with that. You can put on the application form if you're not sure, a couple of different scripts. We work with that as it goes along. Usually the judges are quite experienced, so they might be able to, have a look at it and know just straight off the bat what genre it is. And then if we're still having difficulty, we'll work with that as we go along. So I wouldn't worry about that if you're submitting and you can't define specifically what genre that is. And somebody else has asked, can you get your novel fair professionally edited? Of course you can. I mean, that's great for the fair. It's great, I'm assuming, for publishers and agents.
Yes, I mean, the one thing I'd say about that is that time is quite tight at this stage in terms of getting an edit done on time
by September,
because not least because most, in terms of freelance editors, most good freelance editors will probably be booked up a couple of months in advance, so it may be very difficult to find.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Yeah, how busy people are. In terms of sending it into publishers and agents, do you think that's something people should do? Get it professionally, pay somebody, or should they?
I think that depends on their confidence in how finished it is. And it may also be just if they've already gone through the experience of submitting and being rejected, then it may be that they're not quite seeing what it is, and in that case, a professional eye can certainly benefit it. Whether it's a manuscript assessment, which can be anything from €300 to €500, for instance, just to get a report, and that could just really get to the core of the strengths and weaknesses of a novel, as opposed to just a full edit, which obviously could be.
Yes. Okay. So Daniela, hi Daniela. How many finalists and how many agents or publishers are expected for 2019? So we usually our submissions kind of varies year to year. So we've gone from 200 up to 450, I think was the maximum amount that we had in. So it does vary. We are anticipating around the 400 mark for this year. And finalists, we are expecting 12, or we're planning for 12. And then agents and publishers, it's usually between 12 to 17. It depends on the agents or publishers' availability, especially people coming from the UK. This year we're hosting it on a Friday, so we might be more availability for agents and publishers. So this year was the highest number. I think we had 17 this year. So that could go up to 20 if the list of publishers and agents go up. The number of finalists may go up as well, so that we have a nice balance of numbers meeting on the day. And Fiona, so hi Fiona, what is the ideal word length for the entire finished novel? Minimum word count to max. So there's no maximum word count. You can have it as long as you want. Minimum word count should be 50,000 words or more, because that's how we define between a novella and a novel. So if it's less than 50,000 words, it's defined as a novella, which wouldn't be eligible for entry. If it's over 50,000 words, that's what's considered, but no maximum on that. And there's no ideal word count. I mean, it depends on the novel. I
think it's what's right first.
What's right
first. Just to add to that, I mean, there are certain expectations around certain genres that, in terms of length. So, a longer novel may be more acceptable for, say, historical or fantasy novel, whereas, the average sort of 70 to 90,000 words might be more, might be more normal for a thriller or literary fiction. The literary, the right right length is the right length.
Yes.
It could be much shorter, it could be much longer.
Okay, great. And let's see. Amanda, when you say you have to be a first-time novelist, does this exclude people who have previously self-published? Okay, so this has been a little bit of a tricky area for us in the past. It does mean that it used to mean if you have a self-published book with an ISBN, that you would be ineligible. We've changed that last year, so there is a small loophole if you're self-published and you've got an ISBN, but there is criteria around that. So the best thing I can say is if you go to our website, irishwriterscentre.ie/novel fair, it will tell you there's a list of 4 or 5 criteria on if you have a self-published book. We determine it by how many copies have been sold. If you've previously self-published and it's been really successful, then you're not going to be eligible. If you previously published and you've sold 1 book, then of course you would be eligible. So there's a few different criteria within that. And again, the self-published book can't be the book that you submit. So if you check out our terms and conditions, that's listed on that. And if you have further queries on that, you can send an email into info@novelfair.ie as well, and we'll get back to you. And Vit, hi Vit. So the novel is required to be finished by December if selected. That's expected to be a final draft or further edit. So there is definitely further edits. So in December, if you're contacted as a finalist, all you need to do is prove that you have a fully completed original manuscript. It can be a draft, that's completely fine. You'll have 8 to 9 weeks after that to work on it, edit it, polish it as much as you want, or as much as you can do in the 8 to 9 weeks. But you would need to confirm by December that you have a fully completed manuscript. So you'll be sending it in to us. We'll be scrolling through it. We'll be making sure that you're not sending in the same page copied over 50,000 times, or copying from Wikipedia and slotting it in the middle of the book. So we just make sure to check for that. So that's completely fine. If you don't have it finished by the submission date, that's completely fine. But you should have a nice draft and know where it's going by December, and have a fully completed at least first draft by the first week in December. So let's see, any other, so another question that came into us before the webinar is if autofiction memoir is eligible for entry. So this again is a little bit of a tricky area. So we would say autofiction is eligible. Autofiction is fiction. It's just, I suppose, based quite closely on somebody's personal experiences, but it's a fictionalized account of those experiences. Memoir isn't fiction. So if it's more a memoir, then it would be ineligible. So it's a little bit of a tricky area. Again, if you want to email into us, we can give you a call and chat that out over the phone. But we would say if we're splitting that, autofiction is eligible, memoir isn't. So I guess we'd need to discuss it a little bit further to fully understand autofictional memoir, and to kind of have a better idea of what your work is, so that we can judge that. So I think we've gone through our questions. I think that's the end of our questions. So if you do have questions, and if we didn't answer them, or if you didn't get a chance to send them in during the webinar, do send them in to us at info@novelfair.ie, and we will get back to you very quickly. And we check it regularly, and we'll respond to all queries. Lucy has just messaged in. Hi, Lucy. Is it just literary fiction the Novel Fair is looking for? So no, popular fiction, all kinds of fiction, any kind of fiction is eligible. It just has to be fiction. So we've had lots of success with crime fiction. We've had children's, young adult fiction has been submitted as well. Again, it just needs to be 50,000 words or more. We've had sci-fi, historical fiction, romance fiction. I'm sure somebody last year or the year before sent in romance. We've had fantasy, absolutely anything. So it does not have to be literary fiction. That tends to be the biggest amount of, or the strongest genre that gets submitted to us, but by no means does it have to be that at all. And the agents and publishers who are here on the day represent, all genres, so please don't worry about that. I might just go to then just a few notes. We have a few notes on the 2019 fair. So we'll bring those up on screen now as well. So we've got some important dates for 2019. So Friday the 28th of September 2018 is the deadline for submission. So that's 5 weeks from tomorrow, folks. So if you are planning on entering, get going on it. Read, rewrite as much as possible. Get as much advice on it as you can. Like Brian says, join a writing group. Get feedback, offer to feedback on other people's work, and have your 10,000 words as polished as possible. So you have 5 weeks from tomorrow for that. The week beginning Monday, 3rd December is when finalists will be contacted, so you should be able to confirm that you have completed at least first draft at that stage. You will have 8 to 9 weeks from that date to edit your work, so that's completely fine. And then we also run a novel fair prep day on Saturday, the 2nd of February 2019. It's not compulsory, but it tends to be a very fun day. We have the 3 judges come in, so you get to meet the people who have selected your work. You get divided up into groups. You're usually with the judges who have strongly advocated on your submission. So they strongly believe in your work, and they help you prepare your pitch for the day. They talk to you about your synopsis, about doing a writer's biog, and you do a little bit of role playing where you pretend you're sitting in front of the publisher or agent and you're pitching your work. So it's quite a good day, and we offer tips and advice, and you get to see the room that you're going to be in. So that tends to be quite a good day for people. And then Friday the 15th of February 2019 is the novel fair day itself. In order to be eligible, you do have to be free and available on February the 15th. If you aren't free on that day, then you're ineligible to attend, then your place will go to somebody else. So then just a few notes. So this has come up again in the webinar. So it must be a novel. It's a novel fair competition. It has to be fiction. And children's books are considered eligible, or YA, I suppose, but there has been children's books submitted in the past. But it does have to be a novel, so it can't be a picture book or anything like that. No, it should have to be approximately 50,000 words. Applicants should send in their synopsis, maximum 300 words. That is strict, and up to 10,000 words of their novel, preferably the first 10,000 words. And you can send 2 copies of your manuscript and 3 copies of the synopsis. And then you also have to send in your application form. Some people do tend to forget their application form, so please don't forget that. It's very important. A limit of 1 entry per applicant, excuse me. And it should be 50,000 words or more. It should be finished by Monday the 3rd of December. Probably repeating myself here, but these are important things to note because people tend to forget or get things a little bit mixed up. And you have 8 to 9 weeks to edit and refine your work then before the fair itself. So if you are selected as a finalist, we'll also chat to you about ways that you can work on your novel between being selected and the fair. We'll be able to give you tips and help you come up with ways to work on your novel. So that is a wrap. Thank you so much to everybody who has tuned in. Thank you so much to everybody for your queries. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks so much to Brian for joining us today. Really enjoyed it. Big thank you to Kate Cunningham, who nobody can see, but she's behind the camera and she's done lots of work on this today. So thank you for that. And best of luck to everybody who enters. And I wish you all success. Thank you very much.